my concern is that when comfort and convenience return, people will fall back into old habits pretty quickly, you know?
Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. Today we have Paul with us on here, Paul Toolan, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, Green Beret, active duty still, not retired, not separated like all the others we've had on here. So it's a special occasion. God bless America, and thank you for your service, Paul. Also, Paul, one of the things that I really was excited about having Paul on the show is he's founder of the Green Marine, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to walk through several things with Paul because there's a lot going on and a lot of fun. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Like I said earlier, when we were in the green room, my wife tells me that nobody likes the sound of my voice better than I do. So this is just a great opportunity for me to just talk.
This is the show for you.
Yeah.
And thus the headphones, right? So you can hear yourself better. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, these are noise canceling, so I don't hear what I'm saying at all. So it's even better.
Oh, that's great. Hey, I want to jump in. Like I said, the Green Marine is just something I think is just so cool. Tell us what got you started. What's the catalyst that caused that, and give us a little bit of the background.
Sure. So, I mean, the story has a number of different trajectories that lead into it, right? And typically, so my partner, who I started it with, is a guy by the name of Dave Pye. You may or may not know him from LinkedIn. Very prolific poster on LinkedIn. Very big presence. So people may or may not be familiar with him. But people typically tend to think, when they learn about us, they're like, okay, I get it. Paul Toolan, he's a Green Beret. And Dave was a Royal Marine. Oh, Green Marine, that makes sense. And it was none of that, man. It was none of that. It was essentially just kind of the universe bringing us together with two kindred spirits with like-minded ideas. And our like-minded idea was essentially, it comes from a little bit of what you and I knew as our warrior ethos as Green Berets, and what Dave knows as their commando ethos about loyalty and honesty and integrity and humor and candor and all those kind of things. So we just kind of found each other and discovered that we had this kindred spirit, and began talking through the things that we believed in and things that were meaningful to us, and how we thought we could bring about change. And we acknowledged that, change just doesn't come from shouting or cajoling or bullying people into, your believing in your position. What it comes from is people taking action. So not wasting your time on negative energy and just, complaining and talking about things, but taking action. And the easiest action to take is always the smallest action, right? And so our idea is in no way remarkable. It is not revolutionary. It is not new. The idea of thinking globally and acting locally, which is kind of the underpinnings of what we're all about, is not a new idea. So we're completely unoriginal. But it occurred to us as we talked to these things, that the nature of many of our problems had to do fundamentally with disconnection, right? So being disconnected from one another, being disconnected from your natural world. And again, I already warned you about this. I ramble, but I'm going to keep going because I want to explain.
I want to say one thing though.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just one though, and then I'll let you keep going. No.
All right.
But what you're talking about is leading by example. I mean, that's quite literally is. What are those small things that you can do, not talk about doing, but taking the action to do that demonstrates? And it's like it's that. It reminds me of the dancing video at the conference, at a concert that everybody uses as a leadership demonstration. It's not the whack job that does it initially. It's the true leader is the first follower, and how those actions start to pull people. And what you and your partner have done is take those little nuggets of action and start to create a movement. So I commend y'all on that and that concept.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing too. I talk to a lot of people about the Green Marine. I don't think you guys use any of this video. We're just doing this so that we can, visually see one another. But, I'm wearing my Green Marine shirt. So I'm always talking about the message and the mission, right? And here's what I have always found is that I have yet to run into the person that when I explain to them the message and the mission and what we ask as Green Marines, I have yet to find the person that says, you know what, I don't really think that's for me. Because the ask is so simple and so easy that everybody always says, oh, you know what, yeah, I could do that. Because there's a lot of latitude in what those actions are. So to get back to this idea of connection, right, and us understanding, us understanding how disconnection is the underpinning of most of our problems. So I always use this example, right? It's important to understand where the disconnection came from, because that informs your perspective on how you address it, right? So a lot of people want to assume that we've become disconnected from things for all the wrong reasons, for malevolence or greed or apathy or ignorance. And generally speaking, it's never any of those things. And I'll give you an example that you and I can both empathize with. So if you're in Afghanistan and you're standing in the blistering hot Afghan sun, you appreciate being able to stand under the shade of a tree. There is a thermal difference geothermal difference between standing in the sun and standing in the shade. And you appreciate it there more than anywhere, right? And so if you look around Afghanistan, especially southern Afghanistan, families really value trees for the security that they provide and the comfort that they provide and the safety that they provide. So they really value them. So they build their homes around these trees. Okay, you and I and Cam, we go from our air-conditioned home to our air-conditioned car to our air-conditioned office. And as a result, we don't really value a tree for its shade most of the time. So we've somewhat become disconnected from that. But you have to appreciate that the people who invented air conditioning did so because they were trying to make our lives better. It's not because they were trying to find a way to make more money or because they didn't give a crap about the environment, none of that stuff. And if you waste your time saying, you don't appreciate a tree and you should burn your house down because it's too big of a carbon footprint and you should start walking because your car's emissions is Detroit. If you approach it in that way, then you're never going to get anywhere. You're not going to make any change. But if you redirect all of that energy away from that negativity and the assumptions about how we got to this state of disconnection and just apply them in a simple action-oriented way, then I promise you, you will have a measurable effect not only on yourself, but on the world around you. And then those things will begin to aggregate. And the beauty of the micro mission, so I don't even know if I characterized it yet. It's called the micro mission, right? Well,
there was a lot of passion getting to this point, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I know our listeners appreciate that.
Yeah, I bet they do. They're like, what is this guy? Is this guy going to make a point? I'm famous for doing that. Infrequently making a point, despite the fact that saying many words. So we're predicated on something called the micro mission, and a micro mission is a small, impactful, positive action that anybody can take. Do what you can, where you can, with what you have, whenever you can, right? And the beauty of it is that as we've expanded the brand, and we have ambassadors in all over the world, New Zealand. Well, one of our ambassadors in New Zealand, but New Zealand, Australia, Denmark, Italy, Sweden, all over the UK, all over the United States. And as we've expanded it, what we have discovered is that there are all kinds of micro missions out there. There are micro missions of every size, shape, flavor, color. And as we build this company, so I'll get into, a little bit more for, Cam's perspective and entrepreneurship, some of the background verticals that we're working on with the Green Marine, which are, super important. But what we've discovered is there is a nearly endless sea of micro missions out there that people are advocating for. So we have people who want to save the soil. We have people who want to save the pollinators. We have a whole portfolio that's dedicated simply to kindness. And all of those things are bona fide, quantifiable micro missions that if you do them, they make you a Green Marine. And here's the thing about being a Green Marine. Once you say that the qualifications for becoming a Green Marine are rigorous. It's really, really hard. And here's what you have to do. You have to say, I'm a Green Marine, and you have to try to do a micro mission. And if you don't do it today, guess what? That's okay. You're a human being. I am the Green Marine USA. I'm the guy. Like I'm him. And I promise you, I'm going to admit to the world, there are days when even I'll walk past a piece of trash on the ground because I'm a human being. And so we don't think that the model should be that if you're not all in, then you're all out. Well, what's that going to get you? That's not how you get buy-in. That's not how you get ownership. That's not how you get people to say, hey, I can do this too, because it acknowledges that they're occasionally going to make a mistake. Not a mistake. That's not even a fair characterization. That they're going to have a moment when they just don't have the energy. Hey, that's okay. Try again tomorrow. So,
well, and that goes in just like you're talking about with solving all of these different problems for these micro missions in the first place. It goes back to understanding the person's perspective. And you clearly understand the fact that we're all humans and we all make, whether you call it a mistake or be lazy or whatever it is, we all do that on a regular basis. And that's the really cool thing about these micro missions, which, by the way, I love the term. I hadn't used that one before, is you create these 1% changes and you have this marginal effect where if everyone just does a little bit more, you can have just this big of an effect of trying to, pass some sweeping legislation like you were saying, or whatever other band-aid you want to put over the problem. But then also one of the biggest things I loved is you talked about this, what I like to call as an imagined malice, that it's easier to sit here and think that there's some evil guy behind the curtain trying to make all of this bad stuff happen, that there's somebody trying to disconnect us. But in reality, it's so much just natural human behavior. We naturally go towards people that we look like. We naturally go towards people with like ideas, and we congregate ourselves like that. And then, hey, over time, we wind up separating ourselves more and more from each other, and we grow further and further disconnected. But really what it comes down to is just getting that communication, our favorite buzzword, to break down that disconnect, and then you can solve all these type of problems.
And that disconnect comes in many, many, many forms, right? So people have become disconnected from the natural world around them. And look, we are not an environmental movement. That's not really what we're about. There is a secondary and a tertiary effect of everything that we do that has an impact on the environment. I am not a fan of saying, hey, we should save the planet. Guess what? If we don't do anything, the planet's going to be just fine. The human species will be wiped off of it. So what we're really talking about is saving human species, saving humans, right? So that imagined malice is, it manifests over and over and over again. And I'll give you another great example, or at least what I think is a great example, is the single-use plastic grocery bag, right? It is the poster child for the proliferation of plastic throughout the world. Well, it turns out that the plastic bag was invented by a guy named Toolan, not related to me, Thulin. Totally serendipitous, coincidence. But he was a chemical engineer in Sweden, I think in the late 50s, early 60s. And he worked at a plastic company, and they were making these thin plastic tubes. And he saw that the production of paper bags was beginning to cause widespread deforestation. And he said, man, if we could just turn this into a bag, we could use it over and over and over again, and we'd help to stop deforestation. Mm-hmm. And so he created this plastic bag, and in his mind, you would have that bag and you'd use it forever because it would last forever. And so they did an interview with his kids who said that he would be absolutely rolling in his grave to learn what had become of his invention now that it's a single use. But you're right.
Well, I remember that.
Oh, do you?
I remember when that happened. I remember when we went from paper bags to plastic bags.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work at a grocery store, and it was like, man, we're going to save all the trees and all this stuff. Holy crap! Who knew the second and third order effects of that? Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Well, but that reminds me of one of my favorite pieces of perspective, and it kind of falls into the same area as far as the environment and things like that goes, is with the introduction of the automobile. Because holy crap, was there? Didn't mean to force myself into the pun there, but holy crap, was there a lot of horse crap? Yeah. And the big cities were just filling up with it. And the car was praised as this green solution for all of these problems because it was so outside the box and it was addressing the problem that was there. now, to your point, is that the imagined malice of somebody trying to go and pollute the planet by releasing? I don't even know what is coming out of gasoline. That's a bad one on me. I thought I had that there for a second. But releasing all these gases of whatever the hell comes out of my truck, but when in reality, it's something that was solving a problem. It fixed the problem, and then now we're just left with a different problem we have to solve further down the line.
Right. And so it's for me, and certainly from the Green Marine perspective, it is super important to appreciate that, because if you don't appreciate that, then you're just going to waste energy on the wrong problem. Okay, we're here. We got here. You can turn your energy towards blame and negativity, or you could try to do something. And I'll tell you, one of the criticisms that we often, no, that's not fair characterization. One of the criticisms that we get, and they are infrequent, is that when we post our activities and encouraging people to pick up microtrash, and we used to do a lot of secondhand videos where we were showing people picking up microtrash, and the criticism we would get, if any, was, yeah, but it just goes into the landfill anyway. And our response was always this: that's a true statement. However, right now we're trying to keep it out of the flora and the fauna, and keep it out of our waterways and wildlife. Let's keep it out of the soil. Let's put it where it's going to be. And our goal is to change the consciousness of a generation so that they can then grow up and solve these really big problems that we have. But if we don't start helping them direct that energy in a positive, productive way, even at the smallest individual scale, then it'll never aggregate into global change. And I'm not naive. Look, I don't think Paul Toolan and Dave Pye are going to change the world. But I hope we have some small part in it. And, I think that, and this is a whole, we can go off in a whole nother direction about, people's perception of things and how they're formed. But our latest, our latest bumper sticker is: put down your phone, turn off the TV. If you want to change the world, get out in it. Right. And, just being out in the world. And I'll give you another example. So obviously we're going through a lot of unrest right now. Right. And if you predicate all of your perspectives on what you're being, fed by the information ecosystem, so that's everything, right? That's social media news, that's the whole thing, right? Then your perception is the world is burning. Okay. Now, I go on my way to work every day, I stop at the Dunkin' Donuts, which, thank God, never closed during the pandemic. It was drive-through for a while. Now I can walk in and say hello to the people, but
dude, you were sweating it for a little bit, weren't you?
I was for about a hot minute. I was like, wait a minute, is Dunkin' Donuts going to close? But they stayed open. And but prior to that, every day I would stop there and go inside. Now, when I would go inside, the timing of my visit always worked out with this other customer. She was a young African-American female. I am we'll say, older white male. By the standards of the information ecosystem, we should absolutely have no common ground. We should be adversarial and probably suspicious of one another. And do you know how that actually played out every single day? It played out with a joyous exchange of laughter and smiles. I'd open the door for her. She'd say thank you. She'd open the door for me. I'd say thank you. I'd be like, hey, I hope you're not running late. I mean, and this played itself out over and over and over again. And someone might accuse me of being superficial or naive, and maybe, the deeper issue of what would happen if I had to hire her. Okay, great. Maybe, sure. But the simple fact of the matter is the reality of the environment that I see as it relates to these things versus the reality of the environment that I live out in the world are completely different. And so I think if you base your opinion on those kind of things without getting out into the world, then again, it's like investing your energy in the wrong way.
Well, to use, part of your vernacular, the micro mission, what you've got there is a micro culture. And if we think about that sense, we have this larger culture that's saying these things to us. And if we don't like it, it's no different than doing a micro mission, which is you do that one little thing. If we're creating micro cultures at the Dunkin' Donuts, that's a seed for change. That is a seed for growth and to change the attitude one person at a time. I mean, I was talking about this with my team last night. if you're a lead, we can all be leaders, and you got to lead. And you can lead by doing anything, whether it's the micro mission like the Green Marine, and you're just doing some small thing and making a small change. But that small change starts a movement that changes other things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's I love about the Green Marine. And I want to celebrate that, because some people get in their head that I can't affect. It's the same sense of my vote doesn't mean anything. Well, your vote doesn't mean anything until it's right down to the wire and you're that last one. Or I always tell people, smile. It's a little bit more difficult now. We got to work on our eye infliction now because we're all wearing these masks over our mouths. So that makes it more difficult. Maybe we need to say howdy all the time. But you do that to some, huh?
I say classic Aggie.
Well, yeah.
That's a solution for everything.
It is, man. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what.
It's friendliest campus in the country.
If you say howdy to everybody you see every day for the rest of your life, think of the sea change that you will make in the attitude. Because the thing that I always talk about with the smile is that person may not smile back, but the next person they pass, I bet they smile at that person. It's kind of like when you're driving on the country road and the fella Bubba passes you going the other direction and he waves and you're like, oh, dang it. Yeah. So then what do? You wave at the next 5 people.
So, and I would take a little bit more optimistic view of it, Otis, because, my example of how I have that exchange with my friend at Dunkin' Donuts every day, I think is more common in the culture than what is being portrayed 100%. In the information ecosystem. You know what I mean? So, and that's my point about you got to get out in the world, man. Like you got to, and this gets all the way back to my, to our original, to what the Green Marine is all about. The Green Marine, in a nutshell, is about reconnecting people to the planet and each other. I mean, that's it, and in order to do that, you've got to get out there. You've got to be out in the world, because I think when you go out there, you'd be surprised at what you actually find, right? And, I think, I don't know if you commented on or not, but I made that post about the day after there were protests in downtown Fayetteville. And it was like a little collage of so Saturday night, the information ecosystem was basically telling us Rome was burning, right? The marketplace. So the marketplace is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It's this historic building, but it's very controversial because in the 1800s they sold slaves there. I think to their credit, what Fayetteville has done is memorialize it in such a way that it is a reflection on the darkness of our past. And so I think it's still inappropriate. But anyway, it's controversial. Nevertheless, so there was a protest down there. And if you were listening to the news or watching social media, it was burning to the ground. I mean, it was chaos, right? And lo and behold, the next morning, when the sun came up, the actual story was that they broke some windows and someone did light a fire nearby, but it was, it was still standing there. And an army of people had come out of every race, creed, color, size, shape to clean up the mess. But you got to go out there to see that. You've got to be out there. And it's true, if you don't believe, and again, I've never found the person who disagrees with me yet, but if you don't think taking that single action, that single, simple, impactful, positive action won't have an effect, I would argue that point all day long. And if you doubt me, then go try it. Just go try it. Give it a try and see how it feels. Because most people who come and go in the Green Marine, they're really active for a little while and then maybe not for a little while. They say the same thing. They're like, man, thanks a lot, Paul. I can't even walk past a piece of trash without thinking about picking up. And that's good. That's good. That's how it ought to be, because you've now changed your consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, that was the way I grew up.
Sure, a lot of people did. Yeah.
Whether it was the Boy Scouts, my dad, being a private, doing police call, whatever it was, something got instilled with me, and I can't.
If I had a nickel for every time we could talk a little about transition. I'm an active duty guy, but I'm obviously doing a lot of other stuff as I transition into, beyond my military service. If I had a nickel for every time my wife said, "What do you mean that's a organization? I've been doing that my whole life." Like everything, like every original idea, I think she's like, "Yeah, I've been living my life." She's very earthy, she's like, how we are. We're very kind of black and white, and everything is pretty orderly. She's like an explosion of color. It's just mayhem all the time. You know what I mean? And but she's like, "Yeah, I always pick up trash. Why is that a new thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you're unique. You got to appreciate that. That's not what everybody's doing. We want everybody to do that." But yeah, you're right. A lot of people live their lives that way already, and great. They've been a Green Marine for, they've been a Green Marine. They didn't even know it.
I think going back to what you're saying here, Paul, that we get this disconnection between folks because of the lack of communication that we have. And then it's one of those, if you sit and you just consume, and whether it's the 24-hour news cycle or whatever you want to call it, if you just sit there and just consume and consume and consume, and you keep getting that narrative, whatever that narrative is, however truthful or non-truthful it may be, that's what you're going to start buying into. And the reality is that that helps to grow the divide, because people wind up walking around with all these different narratives. But to your point, it just comes back to the communication, because I know just out of my experience with my friend groups of all sorts of diverse backgrounds, thank God for rugby, right? We talk about things, and 99% of the time, folks just want to be understood. That's really what it comes down to, is I don't have any malice in my heart towards you. I'm disappointed that you're not understanding my point of view. And if you can sit down and get to a point where you can really have a conversation to where you can really understand where each other are coming from, you'll realize, to your point, that we are a lot more similar than we are different.
Yeah, and I think that to compound that, Cam, is that there is an illusion of communication that's created in the way that we communicate now, right? Because it is devoid, it is relatively anonymous. Okay, your name is associated with it, but it is devoid of the realities that come into play when you and I have to understand each other's emotional state. We have to be in the same physical space. Like, I would say 99 times out of 100, or whatever, magnify that to whatever degree you want to, I would say that most people who are willing to be confrontational and obstinate online are not willing to do so in person. And so if you're not willing to do it in person, then you're just going to be continuously building up on that lack of connection with other people. And so I think that creates it creates an illusion of communication that's compounding the problem.
And I think I'll take that a step further while we're going down this little rabbit hole. And, we all talk about the confirmation bias that we get a lot on social media. I think that's kind of something that most people are pretty well understand. But I think a more interesting phenomenon that we see, and honestly, anyone who out there who's done social media marketing, I think this will hit home with you, because it's really hard to break out of your bubble. If you're a rugby guy like myself and I share everything rugby, and my 3 buddies share everything rugby, we're still hitting the same 100 people that like USA Rugby. That's it. And we kind of get lured into this false sense of a larger community, when in reality, our reach is just within our little circle. You could apply that from rugby to any other type of thing. We really don't have as far of a wide-reaching network on social media as we all think we do, because we get grouped in, like we were saying, and again, this isn't out of malice. There's nothing out of malice there. I liked certain pages that are rugby. You didn't, because you're not as into rugby, and we slowly drifted away like that. And then there's a little bit of a disconnect. That doesn't mean that there's no communication there ever, but it means that there's this natural divide that comes up, and we have to be able to deal with that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think you hit upon one of the things that helps mitigate some of this, this illusion of communication, which is diversification. So, and this is something I talk about when I talk to veterans who are transitioning as they're building their network, right? I say, look, when I started building my network, I took a look at it and I was like, man, this thing kind of has the same education that I did and the same experiences that I did, kind of looks like me, probably dresses like me. I would venture to say it smells a little like me. This is not a network, it's a network of me. So, I made a deliberate effort to diversify. And I just started reaching out into just the craziest, 180-degree personalities that I could find. And as a matter of fact, a long time ago, that's how Dave and I met. Just through diversifying my network. I was talking to this guy, that kind of stuff. But I think if you're going to operate in that space, because look, we could say, let's burn social media to the ground. Okay, that's just naive. That's not going to happen, right? So you have to figure out how do you extract the positives? How do you make it something worthy of our human enterprise so that it can enhance what we're doing as opposed to detract from it. That's one of the, so I think I told you, I don't know if we were on camera or off at this point, but a friend of mine and I started something called the Best Pandemic Ever. And the idea is we want to try and capitalize on all these lessons that we've learned, right? All these silver linings. And my fear is that people see the value of certain things and they won't see how it can enhance their human connection. So in other words, like I worry about education and the success that they've had with remote learning. It would be one thing if they continued with that and said, hey, we've discovered that we can be really efficient with these classes, we do them online, and that frees up our students to do all these other things that enhance their human connections and their connections with the natural world. Or if you take it to the collegiate level, when I heard that California wasn't going to be opening their schools in the fall semester, they were going to be doing everything remotely. I thought, well, it would be one thing if they were saying, hey, we're going to do all these classes remotely, but we're going to have all of these other things available, campus life, intramural, all the things that bring people together so they can maximize that and enhance that. But that's not what they're saying. And so for me, that's one of those things that I ponder and I worry about learning lessons that aren't complete or just the wrong lessons from this experience. But again, it kind of weaves in and out of the whole ethos, message, and mission of the Green Marine. I mean, these are all things that fortuitously have become very important to us, right now.
Well, first off, if I could ring a bell right now, I would ring a bell because I think you won the prize for the fanciest word that's ever been said on the Cam and Otis show, fortuitously.
Fortuitous, so, yes. All right, perfect. All right, we better write that one down.
Yeah. Don't ask me to spell it though. I think you hit on something that's really a great point, and I've harped on this with the businesses that I've worked with, and from my military experience, and I know you know this too, because the military is great about capturing lessons.
Yeah,
we're not so good about lessons learned.
Right.
And that point, I if I was on a podium, I'd be stomping my foot right now because that's what we have to do. To go back to your organization, your podcast. I think is it a podcast? The Best Pandemic Ever?
Yeah, Best Pandemic Ever is a podcast. Okay. We haven't released it yet. We just building up. It's like you.
But I love that because I'm doing that with businesses, right? Where what can we do here? Here's a free training class. Here's this. Here's that to help businesses accelerate, and it's not that bad. It sucked when we first got hit in the face, but now I'm back up and I'm ready to go again. And I think
now you're ready to fight.
Yeah. Well, or smile. I mean, you don't always, when you get hit in the face, you don't always have to fight, right? I mean, another solution is to smile and move forward. And the point is, as I'm rambling, must be contagious, Paul. Rambling, is how do we capture these things and not just say in a draconian sense, this is closed. What's between this is closed and this is how it was at the end of February? There is a lot of space in between those two things that we can do, and we can make it a heck of a lot better than it was in February and a damn lot better than it would be if it's just closed.
Right. And I would tell you, the other thing that we've been talking a lot about in both the Green Marine and the Best Pandemic Ever is, everybody's talking about, getting back to normal. Well, look, man, normal wasn't working out so great. You know what I mean? Like, look around at again, that's why this notion of what's transpired, the notion of the best pandemic ever, and what it was born out of is my buddy Jared called me. He's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, dude, best pandemic ever, because I've done all of these things. I don't know if I already said it on the podcast or if it was before we started, but we built we remodeled the bathroom, we tore down a shed, I've taught the boys how to use power tools. We've built 3 pieces of furniture. I've taught him how to fix some things. I taught my oldest one how to pick locks. So he's got to pick his way back in from the garage. I'll lock it. He's got to, the lock pick is not in the garage. He's got to work his way back in. But all these things, it's like, and then you look at all of this isn't data. This is anecdotal. So I'm feeding into somewhat, what I just criticized, just basing it on not my personal experience. But it seems to me relatively clear that the reduction in commuting, the reduction in air travel, the reduction in just general presence in congested places has had a kind of a positive effect. And everyone uses this example, and it could be complete BS, but the dolphins returning to Venice. That's probably an urban legend, but it's illustrative and demonstrative of the realities that you're seeing with the reduction of smog. I mean, and again, I'm not to get on an environmental bandwagon or anything like that, but there are definitely positives that we ought to stop and say, man, do we need to be running around 7 days a week to 5 soccer games and, spending 2 hours commuting back and forth to Fort Bragg, stuck at the gate for 30 minutes? You know what I mean? Like, those ought to be the things that we should be, I hope we capitalize on. But now I'm gonna open the curtain a little bit of my, I'm not gonna say pessimism. I'm gonna say my optimistic skepticism, which is,
I love that definition. Optimistic skepticism. Very well put.
Is that my concern is that when comfort and convenience return, people will fall back into old habits pretty quickly, and that worries me. I mean, the bike industry through the roof, they can't keep up anymore. 150% over their sales, they can't keep up. So, but we're not designed for bike commuting. So what's going to happen is they're going to go back in the garage and gather dust. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think there's some pretty big changes that will need to be made for these lessons to be capitalized on, but I think the opportunity is there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's really interesting when you look at any sort of crisis, is that you have this big economic mechanism that can jar things forward. And then it's really about, different people, the shakers and the movers inside of the economy that are going to lead to those changes lasting. And one of the hardest things you can do is change human behavior. Just in general rule, hardest thing you can do is get someone to change their behavior. But that's why you have to do things like what you're talking about with the micro missions, because you're not changing their behavior much. But if everyone changes their behavior that 1%, then it can start moving forward. And to kind of get my optimist hat on a little bit, which I try to do, if you look at it from that sense of we have to have something that causes that behavioral change, what you really get out of it is you get things where it's more businesses, entrepreneurs, or existing companies that are going to go in and seize on that moment and push things forward and say, hey, look, this is how we're going to do business from now on, and people are going to get on board with it. Because in reality, is it a painful change? No, but it's change, and that's the problem.
Right, and that's why micro missions matter so much. Look, okay, you don't have to ride your bike to work every week. Maybe you ride it once. Maybe you just ride it to the grocery store. But if you make small changes, that's something that everybody can digest. And that's why, again, when I'm out there, and, you can tell I'm a pretty energetic guy. When I start talking about the Green Marine, I get very passionate. My wife's always like standing off to the side, telling me, she's like, slow down. You know what I mean? Because I just get going. But everybody always responds positively because the ask is so small. And I think if the ask is so small and people start to implement just very small changes, over time, it'll aggregate. They'll start to feel the positive benefits of that. It's like you said, Otis, smiling at somebody, and you don't think about it, but just, try smiling at a stranger. You'll actually feel better. You really will. I know that sounds very new age and kind of granola, but really, that kind of positivity, you don't have to do it. Look, we all have a bad day, man. Everybody has a bad day. That happens. But if you try to make that small change, introduce it into your life, every day. And again, bear in mind, if you don't, that's okay. You're still a Green Marine. Just come back and try it again tomorrow. And you know what? If you miss tomorrow, then try it the day after that. The door's always going to be open. That's the beauty of the entire movement in the organization. is that it is entirely judgment free. Look, if you were the worst person on the face of the earth that suddenly decided you were going to start changing your ways, I mean, we got a place for you, because you can't, because it can't be about, again, that negativity and blame. That's just packaging the Toolan and the air conditioning examples in a different way, right? I'm just going to focus on everything you screwed up. I mean, I know there's probably a long list of things you've screwed up, Otis. We don't need to go into that now, but let's do it. No, listen.
Not enough time in the day. Let me tell you.
Let me explain something to you, Cam. You two SF guys can't start going down into that closet. We can't start dusting off each other's skeletons. That's not never ends well. No, but you know what I mean? Like, and so everybody makes mistakes, and so having an organization that just you're just not good enough, you're just not doing enough. Well, what does that get you? That just gets you a bunch of people that have a lot of negativity, and they're trying to focus their negativity instead of focusing their positive energy. It is so much easier, believe it or not, to get a bunch of people to focus positive energy in a small way than try to aggregate negative energy at scale. It just, it just doesn't work.
So something that we're kind of touching on that I'd like to open up a little bit of dialogue about with both y'all, because it keeps coming to mind with me, is this effect. And I would have done all my research on this ahead of time if I'd known we were going to go this direction. But you see this behavioral phenomenon with people who are making conscious, let's call them green choices, just because those are the studies that come to mind. Whether it's I drive a Prius, or I'm vegan, or whatever type of title you want to put to yourself for the good you're doing in the world. And one of the things that they found is the people that are proudly identifying with those type of variables, that are the look how good I'm doing in the world, they are significantly less likely to actually go out and do your micro missions that you're talking about. Just to throw out, I'm not trying to destroy anyone that has a Prius. I'm sorry. It's just what came to mind. But, it's the whole, I drive a Prius, so I don't have to hold that door open for that old lady. But you kind of wind up doing this mental gymnastics, because where in the back of your mind, you're already doing something so good that you don't have to do these little things that are good. So in your mind, how does that fit into your micro missions goal and, trying to create that lasting effect to where you don't have somebody who's just patting themselves on the back for picking up a plastic bag every now and then?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you convert somebody like that, because I think it's all a problem of the same ilk, right? It's this notion of I'm doing what I'm doing, but that makes me better than you, and you need to change. Well, that doesn't work, man. It doesn't. You can't shout, bully, cajole, or force somebody into compliance. We know that's not how human beings work. That's not going to get you anywhere. And so, I'm not saying that somebody with that attitude is a lost cause. I'm just saying that, part of what we have to try and do is wake them up to the reality of their position, and that it's not a position of I'm better than you, because again, fundamentally, Cam, if you peel it back, you're going to get down to a level of disconnection. Because if I'm truly connected to you and I truly care about you, then my perspective is never going to be that I'm better than you. You don't do enough, because we're connected in that way, So I think that fundamentally, again, it all, I could do this all day long. I could tie a lot of problems down to fundamental disconnection between people and between the natural world in which we exist. But I think that what you've described is essentially the same kind of problem, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's this idea that, I'm going to invest my energy in telling you that you're not good enough. Essentially, maybe I'm not manifesting it quite that way, because I believe I'm doing good, and I'm holding myself on a pedestal. But if you're holding yourself on a pedestal, then you're looking down on somebody, right?
No, well, I think you answered that exactly.
I'll throw something on there from what I learned going through my coaching certification about energy levels, and you kind of hinted at it, but I'll give you the academic proof of it, is that if you have a positive energy, you don't have as much judgment. So if you're pissed off and you're negative and you're dragging your feet around, then everything pisses you off, and you judge everything as, well, they're not doing enough and they're not doing enough. But if you flip it and you're in a positive state of mind and you're like, hey man, this is good. Optimism, man, the best is yet to come. When you have that sort of attitude, you look around and it's like, man, great job. I appreciate that. Or, hey, man, maybe next time you can help out. Or maybe I need to help you out a little bit more, because it's that sort of thing. When you are in a positive state of mind, you don't judge people or things, because you're not blaming them. You're accepting them as they are. And that's a great place to be when you do those little things. And going back to the micro missions, those are triggers that can create that positive sense. What's that thing that I can do? I always, with my clients that I coach, I always have them figure out, if you find yourself in a negative state of mind, a negative energy, what can you do to change it? How can you flip it? And a micro mission is a great way to do it. I talked to them about doing something physical, get the blood flowing again. But if you change into that positive attitude, and man, guess what? I picked up a piece of trash today. Or, I held the door, or Camden's grocery store thing. I brought some baskets back to the basket holding thing because they were all over the parking lot and I didn't want a gust of wind to come up, and I just did that.
Yeah.
Nobody asked me.
It's just, yeah. I mean, you and I, Cam, maybe you haven't had this experience, but I guarantee that your father has, and I know I have, is working in an environment where everything was acrimony and anger and shouting and knife-handed accusations. You know what I mean? You and I have definitely been in those environments, right? Hey, guess what? Nobody wants to work in an environment like that for a reason. That kind of negativity just doesn't. It's not scalable, right? Not in a positive way. Well, I suppose it's scalable in the wrong way, but we always say that the feelings of euphoria that you get from carrying out a micro mission are yours to keep forever, right? And it's true. And you make a perfect point. That's just one more. You've actually introduced a brand new micro mission. No one's ever mentioned that one. Bring a couple shopping carts back to the holder. And that's it. But that's the point. Like,
that's my favorite one.
Dude, that's great. I mean, that's a great one. Everybody has that one. That'll be on a post probably in the next 24 hours, because that's exactly it. It's so easy. You're already doing it. Now start magnifying those and setting the example for others and talking to other people about doing it as well. Because sometimes people just don't even realize it, how easy it is to do something like that. And when they start doing it, they start feeling the effects. There's no way that they won't.
And, when you start behaving in that way, you feel more connected to each other, and you kind of start to fight that disconnection that we've been talking about this whole time. And I think, Dad, to your point, and, to put on my stoicism cap for a second with a little bit of Marcus Aurelius, it's when you have that negative mindset and you try to look at things through a negative light, you're forcing it. And that's the way I try to look at it. If you go out, like I've got a pool out here that I like to go lay out at when I'm taking a break or go read my book out there. I have bees that land on me all the time while I'm out there. The bees don't sting me because I accept the bees for what they are, right? There's your stoicism moment. If you go out there and you get mad at a bee for stinging you, you're the idiot, not the bee. The bee is going to do what the bee is going to do. Same type of thing goes on with any sort of person. A person that is negative is going to go out and they're going to be negative, or they're going to try to bring you down, or whatever it is. You can't let that happen, because that's just who they are. You can't judge them for it. It's, whether it's their nature or their mood or whatever you want to call it, that's just the situation you're in, and you have to take it for what it is and move forward and be positive.
Yeah. And I would tell you that, the reality is that being connected is our natural state. It is what we are biologically engineered to do for millennia, right? Whether it's connected to the natural world or connected to one another. I would challenge anybody to show me the scientific study that demonstrates humans do better in isolation or humans do better with less human-to-human contact. Now, I'm gonna nip the Twittersphere in the bud and tell you that no, Tom Hanks in Castaway does not count. When someone comes out and says, yeah, but Tom Hanks lost all that weight when he was by himself, isn't that great? No. First of all, that's a movie. And second, at the end, he went batshit crazy. So no, that doesn't count. So, but my point is that there is no example. We are designed to be connected. So what we are doing to ourselves is actually the opposite of how we are designed to exist as a species, right? So, that's our natural state. So getting to it is much easier than people think. It's just as you got to walk away from some of that other stuff. And again, I'm not advocating that, we burn social media to the ground. No, it has a wonderful place. It's, I have a guy that I grew up with. He was my oldest friend. And I hadn't talked to him in, I don't know, like 10 years, time had passed. And we connected on Facebook, and this is years ago. We connected on Facebook, then we started trading messages back and forth. And I said, hey, I told my wife, I said, hey, I think I'm going to go out and visit Rob. We both grew up in Rhode Island. He moved to Washington State. And I said, I think I'm going to go out and visit Rob. And my wife, being the person that she is, like I said, she's like an explosion of color. She is the Green Marine. I mean, she's like she's the embodiment of it. She's like the personification of it. And she's like, you're an idiot. She's like, don't you go out there every year? She's like, that's your oldest best friend. What are you doing? And so that's what we do. Every year we get together in October now. And I have to give credit to Facebook for re-energizing that relationship. Mm-hmm. So, there's value to these things for sure. But you have to be able to use them in a way that enhances your connectivity, not, takes away from it.
That reminds me of a couple years ago, Mark Zuckerberg was on Freakonomics, and they did a nice long interview with him and Stephen Dubner. And one of the things he talks about is the potential of social media, and how when you look at it, when it first came in and we all thought about how connected we were going to be, and it hasn't really come to fruition like that. And people want to say, oh, it's bad. Like you're saying, burn social media to the ground, whatever kind of perspective you want to take on it. But in reality, it's just a tool that we weren't using properly. And there's still potential to use it properly. I know, just as an easy example, the Facebook groups that have gone up on, like, they're on freaking steroids over the last several years, I would say. I don't know how many y'all are in. I know I'm in a lot. And there's these nice little groups, whether it's some TV show I love or rugby or whatever it is. But you're creating that community and trying to broaden your horizons that way. And, take those circles and connect more of those circles like we're talking about, rather than just sticking in with that confirmation bias and putting your head down.
Yeah, and I would say, hey, look, if you enjoy being in that space, okay, there's a place for micromissions there too. I would say that if you can't find a way to disconnect from all that and reconnect with the planet and each other, well, geez, just try being positive on there once in a while. I make a habit, so I've developed a habit lately of, if I don't go on Facebook very much, but I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because it tends to be a more positive platform. But if I open up LinkedIn and the first thing I see is just like negativity and vitriol, and just I automatically, I'm out for 24 hours. I shut it up, and I won't even go back. But like that. So if that's the first thing I'm seeing every time, I'm out. I don't even, because when I wasn't, boy, it is so easy to get trapped in just reading a conversation, and then suddenly you realize you're like, this is just misinformed garbage and anger and an echo chamber, but even if you're being conscious about it, sometimes you get trapped in it. So now if I see something negative, boom, I shut it off, because I want to see my friends' kids, you know what I mean? I want to see, funny stuff. I want to see, accomplishments of my friends and family, things like that. But the other stuff I'm not so interested in. And I know it doesn't serve me. It would create a false narrative of what the world is really like. And I know that it's not really like that, because I get out there in it.
Oh yeah, and if you ever want that negativity, it's not too far away if you want to look for it, right?
Oh yeah.
You don't need that in your face all the time. If you really want to go out and find it, you can do that really quick.
And I'll tell you, the human brain is not equipped to process information at the volume and velocity at which it is provided to us now. Mm-hmm. You can't do it. Like, I'm not a dummy, but I'm no genius, but none of us can process information of that magnitude and get anything of value out of it. When you're getting constantly bombarded with information, then that's going to shape your perspective on the world, and it's going to shape your wellness and your level of anxiety. I had a friend who, when COVID started, his wife was glued to the news, glued to it. And her level of anxiety was going up and up and up and up. And he said to her, look, he's like, you never watch the news. Why did you suddenly shut that shit off? Just shut it off. And she did. And her level of anxiety went down and down and down. She was like, yeah. And I am fond of saying, if this happened before radio, before wireless communication, I wouldn't even know it was happening. I bet you wouldn't even know it was happening either. And again, that's not to diminish the suffering, the loss, the pain, the hardship of anybody who's, had, look, if one of my family members had become ill and passed, I couldn't disconnect myself. I couldn't separate myself from them. I'm not that emotionally intelligent. I know I'd be as I'd be as paranoid as anybody about how terrible it is, right? But I haven't, so I've got that luxury. But you turn all that stuff off, and I don't even think about it every day. I really don't. And somebody probably come up on in your comments and be like, "I'm the worst person ever. How could you? You're spreading it." I don't know. I don't have an answer for that except
what you're talking about though is this this ability of our mind. I refer to it as our caveman mind to protect ourselves, our survival instinct. We want to know where danger is.
100%.
And our news channels have figured that out, and they market to that. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the local news, the online blogs, the full-time news channels, whatever it is, they market to our sense of fear of survival. Mm-hmm. We want to know, I always talk about it this way, we want to know if there's a tiger behind the rock. Mm-hmm. And if there's a tiger behind the rock, I don't want to go to that rock. I want to go this way over here when I go out and I go fishing, right? And that caveman mind latches towards that fear. Mm-hmm. But what we have to realize is that this point in our evolution is there ain't a tiger behind the rock, and it's our choice whether or not we want to live with that fear and dive into it and pull that fear. And that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna help you out. There's no tigers in Colorado. You're going to be fine, Otis. All right, don't worry about it. No, but can somebody objectively say that the delivery systems of information these days are predicated on anything other than getting your attention to generate revenue? I don't think you can. I mean, there might be some out there, but they all have to survive financially. And so they all have to continue to get your attention. And so they're motivated by that. I would challenge anybody who wants to argue with me that that information is strictly informational. It doesn't pay the bills. They can't keep going if they don't. So you've got to work really, really hard to find objective information. But all that aside, most of it 99% of it you don't need. You don't need to know that stuff to be informed about this, about the state of anything. You can get that just by being a citizen in the world.
Well, one thing, Paul, that I was going to kick myself if I didn't get to in my notes, and I know we didn't talk much about your Army time. We've actually been on the Green Marine stuff, which I love, which is weird because you're the one guy that we've had on that's still active duty, and somehow we didn't even talk it. And this might be a simple one for you. So I just was curious, what is the job scope of the Director of Special Forces Training? Because that sounds like one of the most badass coaching jobs you could possibly draw up. And I don't know why you're not working for the Denver Broncos or somebody.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why, because I don't do any of the work. First of all, I'm the deputy commander of the 1st Special Warfare Training Group, right? So I have achieved that which I aspired to. I am a mid-level bureaucrat, and I process a lot of paperwork. But my boss, Stu Ferris, who is the only reason I'm still in is because of that guy. I'm working because he asked me to come do this job for him. And the reality is that, if the Denver Broncos want, coaching experts, they would go to our cadre, the non-commissioned officers who are actually out there teaching. So what we do at the Special Warfare Training Center is essentially 2 things. One, we assess and we select potential Green Berets. And then once we've selected somebody to become one, we train them on how to be a Green Beret. And the guys who do all of that are, out in the trenches. I mean, yeah, my position in title sounds interesting, but, we're really there to provide, general guidance and intent and ideas. And it's really the guys on the ground who are unbelievably adept and expert at, spotting and assessing the right kind of guy. Plus we have a system that's been proven for a decade, for more than half a century. That is a model that is revered the world over for, how you find the right kind of person. And then we have just the absolute best teachers, coaches, mentors, trainers that do the work every day.
So you're not the guy who came up with the Sandman and all that kind of stuff.
No, I'm the guy who suffered under it. I mean, yeah. What was the guy's name? What was the Colonel? Was it Colonel Troutman? Was the guy in Rambo that when Brian Dennehy, God rest his soul, was saying, what did he? I don't know the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of, why did God make a man like Rambo or something like that? And then off in the distance, Troutman says, God didn't make Rambo, I did. And ostensibly, like, he's a full colonel. So he's like Stu Ferris. He's like the commander. I'm like, I need to do, maybe he was an instructor at one time, but not really. But yeah, I will tell you this. The great thing about that job is that you are surrounded every day. Like the next generation always gets a bad rap, right? Oh, they're all entitled. They're all lazy. They're all this, they're all that. Let me tell you something. The next generation is pretty good. I was a battalion commander in 5th Special Forces Group. And so I saw these young men who were coming out of the qualification course where I am now. And I can tell you, they were fitter than I ever was, smarter than I ever was, more creative than I ever was, just better at it than I ever was. Now, that could just be that I was never very good at it. But my point is that, if you ever want to have faith or have your faith restored in the next generation, come out to Camp McCall at Fort Bragg, and I'll take you out and I'll show you the promise of the next generation, because it's all right there, and they are remarkable.
Paul, I remember having that same feeling, when I was a SF company commander and looking at my team leaders and thinking to myself, wow, I'm glad they're not in my year group, because I'd never get promoted.
Right? They're great. It's really, being surrounded by enthusiastic young guys who are trying to achieve this incredibly hard thing is absolutely an uplifting experience daily.
Well, awesome, Paul. I really appreciate you taking time. Thank you to the U.S. government for allowing you to spend some time with us today. Camden, what'd you learn?
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack on something I said earlier. I went and Googled it while y'all were talking because I don't want anyone coming at me about this. I learned that cars produce carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So CO2. There you go.
Yep, there you go. Yep. We are scientifically sound now. Nobody can say we didn't do our research.
There you go. Paul, what'd you learn today?
Oh, I learned that, to some degree, I think what I've learned is that the notion of a micromission is universally recognized for the potential that it has, because you guys have just reinforced what I always experience, which is I talk about it and they're like, yeah, I can do that. That sounds really easy. So I am too old to learn anything new, but it's always good when the things that I think I know are reinforced. So I move a little bit down the road of feeling like I'm doing the right thing with the Green Marines.
That's awesome. And that's what I say almost every show too, is like, I get a lot of, oh yeah, in the show. I didn't really learn that new, but I got reminded that at one time I knew that, and oh yeah, that sounds familiar. And the one right in line with your micro mission is what I learned. And is they're infinite. I think that is just, that right there, I think is so cool, is that it doesn't have to be this thing. It can be this thing, that thing. It could be something else. You can make it up. It's just all about doing good and making a change, making things better for the world. Quite frankly, with your little micro mission, and think about that, 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion micro missions. What's the math on that? That's a lot. That might make a change. I think 1 trillion micro missions could probably make a change. So that's really.
I think it's like 1.24 trillion micro missions, and we're just better at that.
Yeah, we'll get there.
That's some great math. Paul, how can people find out more about Green Marine and sign up to support, all those sort of things?
The best way to do it, frankly, is we have and again, I apologize for dragging this out for longer than it should be, but we have a very deliberate plan on how we're developing the Green Marine. And so we have intentionally contained it, and we've had to contain it a couple times on LinkedIn, because it's a positive platform, primarily professional. So the best way to start getting involved, following myself, following Dave Pye, and watch for our posts about micromissions, daily micromissions, positivity, and then join in the conversation by sharing your micromissions.
Awesome. Thanks again, Paul. Great to have you on, and really appreciate your time. Camden, run us out, please.
All right. Thank you all again for listening to today's show. Special thanks to Paul Toolan for joining us today, and our sponsors, MASH, Military and Athletic Strength Hemp Oil, and Verbi Virtual Fundraising. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you can get your podcasts. And check out full archives at thecamandotishow.buzzsprout.com. Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.